We're going to break down for you right now some of the top claims from Blake Lively that Justin Baldoni has attempted to debunk in their ongoing legal fight. Through text messages, videos, screenshots, the director of It Ends With Us says he can prove that he didn't sexually harass the actress and he didn't try to destroy her career. All right, this is something we wanted to do for a while now. With so much he said, she said, it can be kind of tough to keep track of what exactly Justin Baldoni claims he has refuted with respect to Blake Lively's claims. I mean, it could be something as broad as I didn't create a hostile work environment for Blake Lively, to something as more specific, that Baldoni has argued that neither he nor the other defendants had agreed to a 30-point list of demands, but rather only a 17-point list of demands before Lively came back to set. And by the way, apologies if there was confusion on that point, especially on that point. I think I even got confused on it, but it appears that Lively is going to try to make the argument that they all agreed to 30 points, but Baldoni has been emphatic that his team never received or agreed to that 30-point list, but only that they allegedly signed on to a 17-point list of demands, such as there are to be no discussions of personal experiences with sex or nudity, including as it relates to conduct with spouses or others. Anyway, the bottom line is, there has been a lot of refuting of Blake Lively's claims. And this all becomes very important, both from a legal, defensive, or offensive posture point of view, and also with the public. Because after Lively filed her civil rights complaint that matured into a federal lawsuit against Baldoni, his production company Wayfair, the company's CEO Jamie Heath, and other defendants, claiming that Baldoni sexually harassed her during the production of the movie It Ends With Us, the movie they co-starred in and Baldoni directed, and she has alleged that he helped orchestrate a digital and media smear campaign against her. The idea being that Baldoni and his team conspired to draw up all of this negative press and attention and turn the public against her as a form of retaliation for Lively speaking up about her allegations against Baldoni. And if she did make her allegations public, this would be a way to discredit her. You saw a lot of public sentiment turning against him, right? He was dropped by his talent agency, public sentiment turned against him, he lost an award, you saw people in Hollywood siding with her. He fires back. And then he filed a lawsuit against her, her husband, actor Ryan Reynolds, and others, claiming they defamed him. They tried to extort him. That essentially, they weaponized false allegations and used their power and prestige to bully and intimidate him into giving Lively full control over the film and box him out. And he also sued the New York Times as well for publishing a bombshell article on Lively's complaint the day after she filed it, claiming the Times presented a completely one-sided narrative filled with factual inaccuracies, out-of-context messages and communications, that they did not do their proper due diligence. And most recently, we had a court hearing this past week where the judge had to work out the scheduling and procedure of the case, a trial currently set for March of 2026, but also he admonished and warned both sides, really the lawyers, to be very cautious about what public comments they make about this case, to not say anything that could potentially taint a future jury. And that's important because for Brian Friedman especially, this is Justin Baldoni's attorney, he has been fighting this in the public just as much as in legal filings, seemingly creating a website filled with extra correspondence, releasing behind-the-scenes footage, constantly talking about the case on podcasts and interviews. But I say all this to say, we want to do something right now that I think is very important in this case. The top Blake Lively claims that Baldoni has tried to debunk or refute. Now, if this appears one-sided, it's supposed to be. It's his arguments. We don't know if they're true. We don't know if they can be proved, but it's important to understand what evidence and arguments he has because he has tried to counter every one of Blake Lively's claims in different ways, some more specific than others. So I want to begin with something that was arguably, and depending upon who you ask, may remain to be one of Blake Lively's strongest claims as backed up by evidence. You see, the allegation that she was the victim of a smear campaign, and she says she's got the text messages to prove it. So particularly the messages between Baldoni and Melissa Nathan, his crisis management expert, and Jennifer Abel, his publicist. So I want to go to her complaint. Her complaint reads, on August 16th, Miss Nathan circulated a Daily Mail article entitled String of Hard-to-Watch Videos That Have Surfaced Following Tone-Deaf Q&A to Promote It Ends With Us Could Tarnish 36-year-old star's golden Hollywood image for good. To which Abel responded, wow, you really outdid yourself with this piece. And Miss Nathan replied, that's why you hired me, right? I'm the best. As their own words reveal, the purpose of this social manipulation plan was twofold. It aimed to both conceal the pattern of harassment and other misconduct by Mr. Baldoni, Mr. Heath, and Wayfarer, and retaliate against Miss Lively by battering her image, harming her businesses, and causing her and her family severe emotional harm. Millions of people, including many reporters and influencers who saw these planted stories, social media posts, and other online content, had no idea they were unwitting consumers of a crisis PR, astroturfing, and digital retaliation campaign created and funded by Mr. Baldoni and Wayfarer to hurt Miss Lively. That is precisely the goal of astroturfing campaign, to light the fire and continue to stoke conversation secretly, blurring the line between authentic and manufactured content and creating viral public takedowns. By the way, astroturfing is described in this complaint as, quote, the practice of publishing opinions or comments on the internet and the media that appear to come from ordinary members of the public but actually come from a particular company. So you could say, look, that message, pretty damning, right? But then you read Baldoni's complaint, which says this whole exchange is incomplete and it is misleading. And the New York Times, for example, ran with this, that they didn't even include the entire conversation. So you go to Baldoni's amended complaint. It reads, these messages constitute the entirety of the purported evidence underlying the allegation of a smear campaign orchestrated on behalf of Baldoni. But the information Lively fed to the New York Times was apparently selectively and deceptively edited, and it resulting in a gross misrepresentation that actually reversed the sarcastic meaning and tone of the messages. Baldoni continues, specifically, in the immediately preceding text message exchange on August 16th, Nathan forwarded a screenshot of a message from a reporter informing her for the first time of the Daily Mail article. In response, Nathan wrote, damn, this is not fair because it's also not me, followed by, everything now looks like it's me. Perhaps unknowingly, Nathan was already anticipating the accusations that would soon be leveled against her and her fellow the Wayfarer parties. Further evidence of Lively's machinations and the New York Times' malicious and reckless defamation appears in the missing emoji heard round the world. After Nathan forwarded a screenshot of the article link, Abel responded with, you really outdid yourself with this piece, upside down smiling emoji face. Adding that emoji is to indicate the sarcastic nature of her message. The upside down emoji is commonly used to convey irony, sarcasm, joking, or a sense of goofiness or silliness. And Baldoni argues that by Lively, quote, deliberately excluding the screenshot of the rest of the text exchange and the emoji from her complaint and the materials she sent over to the New York Times, that changes everything. That changes the sarcastic tone of Jennifer Abel's message to mislead the reader into thinking that Abel was being literal and sincere. But really, Baldoni says this is all sarcasm, that Nathan really wasn't behind the piece, and there was no smear campaign. Here's another one. In Lively's complaint, she points to a text message from Justin Baldoni where he allegedly expressed concern that Nathan's proposal to what Lively claims was to engage in social manipulation against Lively, that he didn't feel it was aggressive enough. Lively's complaint reads, quote, writing to Mr. Heath and Miss Abel, he said he was not in love with the document they sent, not sure I'm feeling the protection I felt on the call with Miss Nathan and her colleagues. In response, Mr. Heath attempted to reassure Mr. Baldoni that they had found the right people for his campaign. In Mr. Heath's words, the most important part of this is how quickly they can shut things down and place stories in your favor. Again, is that pretty damning? Well, Baldoni has a response to that. His complaint, he argues that other parts of the conversation were excluded, like where Jennifer Abel texted him, the truth is your defense. You have done nothing wrong, and there is over a year worth of facts and paper trails and people who can go on background as your defense. In Lively's complaint, she writes about other messages, quote, later that day, Miss Abel and Miss Nathan exchanged the following text messages expressing that Mr. Baldoni wants to feel like she can be buried. Now, Miss Abel and Miss Nathan agreed that, of course, they would do just that, but could not say so in writing. We can't write it down to him. We can't write we will destroy her. Imagine if a document saying all the things that he wants ends up in the wrong hands. Arguably a very important text message for Blake Lively's story. Now, Baldoni counters this in his amended complaint, saying things were excluded. You know what was excluded from that? Abel's response, of course not. In other words, his argument would be, of course, they're not going to be doing this. Now, there are other messages that could be potentially problematic for Justin Baldoni that even if you include the rest of the message, arguably still could be interpreted by a jury or a judge as Baldoni attempting to destroy Blake Lively. And in fact, in Lively's complaint, it reads, Miss Nathan followed this by assuring Miss Abel, "You know we can bury anyone, but I can't write that to him." Now, of course, he's going to have an opportunity to fight against that and what the meaning of that was. And to give you an idea of that, one of the things that Justin Baldoni has pointed out is that Abel had written Nathan saying that Baldoni overthinks and stresses everything, and he just needs to be educated on how this process works. And Baldoni's lawyers claim that Nathan responded after the "bury anyone" message, "I will, it'll be very tough." The argument being that they were tempering down his expectations of what they can and cannot do, or maybe what they would or would not do. And that's important because they're basically being accused of being responsible for all of the negative press that Blake Lively was getting in the summer. Now, their argument would be that's all Blake Lively's fault, things that she was doing, things that she was saying. But let me just go back to this. On the other hand, to fight this, Baldoni's team claims there is a lot more context here with these text messages about the "bury anyone" messages, because he writes in his complaint, "The Times' failure to scrutinize Lively's false claims or even to provide a balanced account of the events further underscores its role in amplifying Lively's falsehoods while abandoning its responsibility to truth and accuracy. To suggest, as the Times does, that the Wayfair parties engaged in the dark arts of public relations to destroy Lively's reputation is to ignore that Lively had long-standing reputational challenges and the Wayfair party's public relations efforts were rudimentary, above board, and entirely defensive." That's a big argument, that he didn't hire these people to go on the offensive against Blake Lively, but he was worried that she was going to assert false allegations against him. That's why he hired these people to protect himself. Quote, "The Times willingly omits any meaningful discussion of the true source of tension between Lively and the Wayfair parties, which was Lively's brazen and calculated effort to expropriate the film." To demonstrate that, Baldoni includes a group chat message with the TAG team, so TAG being Melissa Nathan's company, and it reads, this is important, like, "Come on, we had nothing to do with that. This is crazy. She doesn't have a good reputation. All of this is organic stuff from real people making TikToks, not bots." That is a very important text message for Justin Baldoni and his argument. So again, that arguably goes against the idea, as Lively claims, that the Wayfair defendants were using a digital army to promote content against Lively that looked authentic but wasn't. In other words, this message would be used to show that the backlash that Lively was experiencing was from her own doing, from her own comments, from her own behavior. Moving on, there's a lot more we got to talk about in terms of Justin Baldoni refuting Blake Lively's claims. So another key claim is regarding the intimacy coordinator issue. This is a big one. So Lively has accused Wayfair of violating industry safeguards like having an intimacy coordinator present on set during intimate scenes, and that Baldoni improvised these intimate scenes. She even claimed that during the very personal birthing scene, an intimacy coordinator hadn't choreographed the action beforehand. And Lively also argued that one of the conditions that Wayfair and Baldoni agreed to before she would return to set after the writer's strike was that an intimacy coordinator must be present at all times when Lively was on set. But Baldoni has refuted this. In his amended complaint, it reads, "In fact, an intimacy coordinator had already been engaged during the first half of the production, so Wayfair took no issue with this request itself, despite both Lively and her attorney knowingly insinuating there was not one." On or about March 20th, 2023, nearly 2 months before filming began, Baldoni met with the intimacy coordinator, and in early of April of 2023, more than 6 weeks before production commenced, she was engaged. Lively was aware, as Baldoni had informed her in writing on or about April 6, 2023. Lively's attorney was also aware, as documented in May 8, 2023 emails between her and Wayfair's attorney, within which Wayfair provides her the intimacy coordinator approved nudity rider, followed by written confirmation of said approval. Later on in the complaint, it reads, quote, "Contrary to Lively's knowingly false claims, it was Lively who refused to meet with the intimacy coordinator to plan out their scenes, putting Baldoni in the awkward position of meeting alone with the intimacy coordinator and later relaying sex scene suggestions and plans to Lively in the intimacy coordinator's absence. These meetings often took place at Lively's insistence in the couple's home, and often while Lively's husband was present. Lively's method of work was unconventional and uncomfortable for Baldoni. To suggest Baldoni was the one who created this scenario is knowingly false. And Baldoni actually incorporates into this complaint a text message exchange. It's an important one. At first, it's a screenshot of a conversation between him and presumably Blake Lively, where he writes her, "Just hired intimacy coordinator who I love, will set you to meet /FT with her next week for intro. To which Lively appears to respond, I feel good. I can meet her when we start. Thank you, though. So that's a message, but then Baldoni appears to send that exchange with him and Blake Lively to an unidentified female producer. And he writes, just FYI, just wanted to tell you about this. Seems she doesn't want to meet intimacy coordinator until we start, which may mess up the workflow, but I can still meet with her, of course. To which the female producer writes back, that's fine if she doesn't want to meet her now. You'll just have to walk her through what you and, I guess this is the intimacy coordinator's name, but it's redacted, are thinking. Now, that helps him for sure, right? But you may say, okay, it's not entirely clear if the intimacy coordinator was there on set or not, and did Baldoni actually meet with the coordinator? Well, his complaint reads, Lively later used these circumstances, created entirely by her, to accuse Baldoni of insisting Lively do uncomfortable or gratuitous scenes. Scenes that were in fact proposed by the intimacy coordinator, and by all accounts, very typical asks of any actor performing simulated sex scenes. This is well documented in handwritten notes Baldoni took during meetings with the intimacy coordinator and later read to Lively. So notes could be a key piece of evidence. In fact, in his complaint, it further reads, she alleges Baldoni personally added graphic content, including a scene in which Miss Lively was to orgasm on camera. This is false. During a creative meeting, which Lively requested to take place in her home, Baldoni read to her his notes from the intimacy coordinator, including a suggestion that Lively's character orgasmed during the scene, similar to the book. Lively remarked, oh no, I'm too old for that. And Baldoni offered another suggestion instead, also from his notes from the meeting with the intimacy coordinator. Baldoni then moved on. If he can produce those notes and it can be authenticated that he took those notes in real time and those notes were relayed to Blake Lively, that's a big point for him. Now, talking about intimacy scenes, there was a big allegation from Lively's complaint. It reads, on another occasion, Mr. Baldoni and Miss Lively were filming a slow dance scene for a montage in which no sound was recorded. Mr. Baldoni chose to let the camera roll and have them perform the scene, but did not act in character as Ryle. That was his character in the movie. Instead, he spoke to Miss Lively out of character as himself. At one point, he leaned forward and slowly dragged his lips from her ear and down her neck as he said, "It smells so good." None of this was remotely in character or based on any dialogue in the script, and nothing needed to be said because, again, there was no sound. Mr. Baldoni was caressing Miss Lively with his mouth in a way that had nothing to do with their roles. When Miss Lively later objected to this behavior, Mr. Baldoni's response was, "I'm not even attracted to you." Now, Baldoni has a response to that. In his amended complaint, it reads, one of the producers played music to set the mood so the characters could slow dance. Lively, consistently unable to take direction, insisted she really liked the idea of the characters constantly talking because, as she described, she and her husband liked to keep talking and talking and talking. Baldoni, her director and the film's assistant director, who was directing the scene, disagreed. In an attempt to encourage her to take his direction, Baldoni offered up that he and his wife often just look into each other's eyes silently. To which she responded, like sociopaths, and laughed. Baldoni laughed and shook it off, while Lively once again started talking about how she and her husband can't not talk. Baldoni said, "I think that's cute," and complimented the couple, to which Lively responded, "I think it's more than cute." Lively continued arguing and tried to direct him for the scene while they were supposed to be in character filming the scene. At some point, Heath and another producer, irritated, called Baldoni aside to express they can't capture the intended shot because Lively wouldn't stop talking. He was instructed to somehow get her to stop. While there was a brief verbal exchange, Baldoni, heeding the instruction of their assistant director and producers, continued to try to bring them back into character. As they were acting in this montage scene, Lively continued to break character and speak as herself rather than as Lily, which was extremely confusing for Baldoni, who was trying to balance directing the scene within his artistic vision while also acting in character while filming and trying to get Lively to do the same. Lively apologized for the smell of her spray tan and body makeup. Baldoni responded, "It smells good," and continued acting, slow dancing as he believed his character would with his partner, which requires some amount of physical touching. Lively took them out of character again and joked that Baldoni should undergo a rhinoplasty. Baldoni laughed it off. Lively incorrectly alleges that this scene was filmed without sound. Baldoni was wearing a microphone, and the entire exchange was captured on camera. The actual footage belies any suggestion that this scene was filmed unprofessionally. Lively's allegation that sexual harassment took place is unequivocally false. And talking about that footage, It appears that Baldoni's attorney released that footage a couple weeks ago. Blake Lively's team released a statement to Deadline in response to the release of this footage, and it was, quote, "Justin Baldoni and his lawyer may hope that this latest stunt will get ahead of the damaging evidence against him, but the video itself is damning. Every frame of the released footage corroborates to the letter what Miss Lively described in paragraph 48 of her complaint. The video shows Mr. Baldoni repeatedly leaning in toward Miss Lively, attempting to kiss her, kissing her forehead, rubbing his face and mouth against her neck, flicking her lip with his thumb, caressing her, telling her how good she smells, and talking with her out of character. Every moment of this was improvised by Mr. Baldoni with no discussion or consent in advance and no intimacy coordinator present. Mr. Baldoni was not only Miss Lively's co-star, but the director, the head of the studio, and Miss Lively's boss. Any woman who has been inappropriately touched in the workplace will recognize Miss Lively's discomfort. They will recognize her attempts at levity to try to deflect the unwanted touching." That video, I have to imagine, if this goes to trial, will be a key piece of evidence and will be refuted and be used by both sides. Now, another key component of Lively's complaint that Justin Baldoni has tried to refute is the allegation of fat shaming. Lively's complaint reads, "Mr. Baldoni also routinely degraded Miss Lively by finding back-channel ways of criticizing her body and weight. A few weeks before filming began, and less than 4 months after Miss Lively had given birth to her 4th child, Miss Lively was humiliated to learn that Mr. Baldoni secretly called her fitness trainer without her knowledge or permission and implied that he wanted her to lose weight in 2 weeks. Mr. Baldoni told the trainer that he had asked because he was concerned about having to pick Miss Lively up in a scene for the movie, but there was no such scene." And as a way to further evidence that, in her complaint, Lively produces another key text exchange. So according to Lively, on August 9th, 2024, Melissa Nathan sent Jennifer Abel 2 links to articles, and more specifically a Daily Mail article that reportedly talked about allegations that Justin Baldoni was chauvinistic, that he was borderline abusive, all on the set of It Ends With Us, and that the article discusses this and other claims with respect to the film and its cast in detail. But according to Lively, and as seen in a copy of a text message, Abel had apparently texted Nathan, "I can tell you've done a lot of work here," and continued, "Nothing about being unsafe, fat comments, sexual." So that could be used by Lively to show that, look, Justin Baldoni did make inappropriate comments about Blake Lively's weight, and he was happy, and his team was happy about them not coming out. Or the counter argument could be for Justin Baldoni that his team assumed Blake Lively was going to be making false allegations against Baldoni, that he was commenting on her weight, and they were happy that nothing came out. Again, 2 different ways to look at that. But more specifically, here is Baldoni's defense to all of that. Quote, in his complaint, "Lively and Reynolds raised entirely false allegations of fat shaming against Baldoni, an accusation that, as evidence will show, was categorically false. Baldoni had been introduced to trainer Don, who became Baldoni's personal trainer, by Lively. Don directed Baldoni's preparation for the film role, including his nutrition and exercise, making special accommodations for Baldoni's back injury. And to further that, there are text exchanges embedded in this complaint that appear to be with this trainer, including talking about a workout regimen." But Baldoni's complaint continues. On April 22nd, 2023, Baldoni privately reached out to Don, his personal trainer, to ask what Lively weighed so that he could train his back muscles in preparation for a lift scene. This was important to avoid injury not only to Baldoni, who suffered from lifelong back injuries, multiple bulging discs, and chronic pain, but also to Lively if the lift could not be completed successfully and safely. Notwithstanding Lively's recent attempts to deny the existence of any such scene, it was only nixed at her insistence after having been planned and rehearsed. And Baldoni claims that to add insult to injury, 3 days later, he claims he's summoned to Blake Lively's penthouse where Ryan Reynolds, again her husband, allegedly berated him, saying, "How dare you effing ask about my wife's weight? What's wrong with you?" Now he says that this confrontation by Reynolds and Lively was so aggressive that he felt he had no choice but to offer repeated and, quote, completely unwarranted apologies for what was a good faith and reasonable question to ask of his trainer. Reynolds demanded Baldoni remove the scene entirely. Lively refused to perform the lift scene in the end, even after it was rehearsed with a stunt double. In her own complaint, Lively flat out lies about the absence of the scene by claiming the scene wasn't in the film. The only reason the scene wasn't in the film is because Lively and Reynolds ensured it was taken out of the film. Accommodating Lively, Baldoni rewrote the scene with Lively, despite the fact that for creative reasons, this scene was important to him as a storyteller and director. Now, While there are a lot more instances of Lively making claims and Baldoni refuting those claims and trying to debunk those claims through, text messages and photographic evidence. His team, by the way, also alleges they have metadata to prove that the New York Times was in possession of her complaint and was preparing the imagery for their article well before the article was published. Again, trying to establish a collusion between the publication and Lively. Anyway, despite all of this, and there's a lot more we could talk about, one more point that I just got to address is Baldoni refuting, have to talk about this, the breastfeeding. This is a big one. So, this quote, throughout filming, Mr. Baldoni and Mr. Heath invaded Miss Lively's privacy by entering her makeup trailer uninvited while she was undressed, including when she was breastfeeding her infant child. Miss Lively often had to work while breastfeeding, which she felt comfortable doing so long as she was given the time and space to cover herself. She did this frequently because she was not given breaks to feed her baby. But Miss Lively didn't expect or consent to anyone entering her private spaces while topless, exposed, and vulnerable with her newborn or during body makeup application or removal. Mr. Baldoni and Mr. Heath both showed a shocking lack of boundaries by invading her personal space when she was undressed and vulnerable. And by the way, Lively even claims that one of the things that Wayfarer and Baldoni agreed to before she would return to set is, quote, no one will enter, attempt to enter, interrupt, pressure, or request entrance to BL's trailer while she is in a state of undress for any reason. But Justin Baldoni claims I have the text to disprove this. And one of his biggest arguments has been that Lively was the one who got personal and never expressed any form of discomfort. In fact, a timeline file that was featured on a website that was published seemingly by his team last weekend, one of the text messages from Lively, apparently to Baldoni, reads, if you knew me in person, you'd have a sense of how flirty and yummy the ball busting would play. It's my love language, spicy and playfully bold, never with teeth. So quite provocative. Then you have another exchange that was presented in this timeline where Baldoni seemingly writes Lively, been deep into writing, really fun with you in mind. And then he seems to backtrack and he texts not really fun is the right word, but rather exciting. And Lively seems to text message him back, you're safe here. Now he could interpret that to mean, I don't have to think twice about what I'm saying. It's open, it's personal. No one's uncomfortable here. I say all this because going back to the breastfeeding issue, this is what it says in his ended complaint. Lively's intimate comfort with Baldoni continued as filming progressed. In June of 2023, after the alleged harassment and uncomfortable situations allegedly occurred, she even invited Baldoni to her trailer to rehearse while pumping breast milk. And produced in this complaint is a text on June 2nd, 2023 from Lively to Baldoni that reads, I'm just pumping in my trailer if you want to work out lines. The complaint continues, Lively was so close and comfortable with Baldoni that she freely breastfed in front of him during meetings, including when her husband was present. Oftentimes, Lively's baby nurse would come in mid-meeting with Lively's hungry baby, and Lively would breastfeed openly and without hesitation. Now, we will see what she meant by pumping, and we will see how each side tries to prove the breastfeeding situation. But I will tell you this, text messages, video evidence, they are going to go a long way in this case, and they are going to be key in this case, and they can be very, very, very hard to fight against one way or another. We shall see what happens next. That's all we have for you right now.